Welcome back. I'm Jeffrey Allmen, yoga teacher, meditation guide, mindfulness coach. Today, I would call this chapter 1, what is mindfulness? We're going to talk about what is mindfulness. There's no easy answer. In this entire video, I'm going to give you maybe one easy answer or maybe multiple easy answers, but know that this is my definition of mindfulness, ever evolving, ever changing. Literally, how I perceived or how I would have explained mindfulness to you 5 years ago is vastly different than it is today. And I imagine 5 years from now, I'll have new perspectives. So I have in front of me 4 different books that I'm going to touch on super brief. And as you know, part of my evolving channel here, which hopefully you're subscribed to, Yoga with Jeffrey, is so much more than yoga, including, I may talk about food sometimes, not a lot, but sometimes. Books, for sure. I've only done one book review so far, but this channel is only about a month and a half old. And each one of these books I will dive into deeply. But today I'm just going to touch on them for your own kind of interest and exploration and study, and perhaps you're looking for a book to read. So here's 4 suggestions. Okay. Start with this one, which is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. My favorite book. It maybe, I don't know, because I've read it like 4 times. How many books has anyone read 4 times? Every time I read it, it's a brand new book. I get something new from it. So hopefully, if you ever wonder, why do people read books more than once? Take a book that you really like and read it again, and you may find newness, some new knowledge or perspective each time you read it. All I will say about this is it's this wonderful journey from boyhood through the entire kind of arc of life. And a big part of this book focuses around the intersection with and the arrival at a river, being a ferryman, and the nowness of the river. So just know that this is the inception point. And if you knew me before Yoga with Jeffrey, I was ferryman yoga and inspired by this book. So that's what I'll say about that, Siddhartha. Now, getting further into this idea of mindfulness, I was reading this book, How to Meditate by Pema Chodron. If you're one of my private yoga students, I may have gifted you one of these books. Oftentimes when my private students buy 5 or 10 packs, I will give them a book, which I always say it's adult education, so I don't require that if you're like intimidated thinking about hiring me as a private yoga teacher and like, oh, I don't want homework. But if you're like wild like me and you're like, oh, I want to read. So this is one of those books that I have given a lot away. It was this book from Pema Chodron that really changed my perspective. I was reading this during my 200-hour yoga teacher training with Yogaview here in Chicago. This was one of the required reads. And I had done yoga for many, many years before that certification, before that training. And I had done meditation and had a concept of what mindfulness was. But it was in this book from Pema Chodron that my entire perspective changed. The quote-unquote aha moment or epiphany. Now, I would say that that understanding maybe was built on a foundation of all the books, all the training, all the practice I had done before, but maybe not. A big part of yoga and meditation and mindfulness is entering. Every time you enter and sit on the cushion or the mat, or in this case, yoga blocks, because I like a little firmness, that you do it with fresh perspective, the eyes and the mind of a child, the curiosity and the wonder of the brand new student. If you can do that every time, you see so much more, you learn so much more if you don't come with preconceived notions. So having said that, I'm reading Pema's book, and my preconceived notion was, I'm a slow reader. I must have really conned someone as a kid, because they said I was highly intelligent, but I think secretly I was not that smart. This was my own, the voices in my head, if you will, until I read this book. Because see, no one had told me ever. Thank you, Pema, by the way, if you end up watching this. You were the first person to tell me that I had to train my brain to focus. I mean, literally put it out there in simple terms. And I still have 2 more books to talk about, and really 3. I realize there's a 5th book that I will highlight, and I don't have a physical copy of it. I was just I gave my last physical copy to my mother, so I need to order another one because I like to have physical copies of my books. But we'll get to that. So Pema tells us that we need to train our brain. At some point in this book, I'm not going to tell you on the page, I'm not going to tell you where, I'm going to say 20 to 30% of the way, maybe a third of the way through the book. And so I read the first, we'll say third of the book quite slowly. And when I say quite slowly, here's how I used to read, and maybe you read this way as well. And that is that I would sometimes read and my mind would wander. I would start thinking about yesterday or tomorrow, and I would just be still reading, but not comprehending, not really downloading that information, just kind of like, it's there, the words are there, but I'm not really grabbing onto them. I'm not really understanding them. And so I often would find myself rereading, going back and rereading pages, multiple pages, lines, paragraphs, maybe whole chapters sometimes. Yeah, like that's unmindful, the opposite of mindfulness, right? So what I learned is that mindfulness is not a particular quality per se. You'll hear people say that. So-and-so is a very mindful person. Oh, they did that very mindfully. I don't know if I think that's a compliment. I love where that comes from. I love where that starts, in the belly of the heart, with compassion. But I think mindfulness is very much an action. It's very much a practice. It's very much something that we actively do, not to achieve necessarily mindfulness, but to achieve nowness. And so in the case of reading more quickly, and I did, all of a sudden I went from being super slow and not comprehending to like flying through this book, because I suddenly started to tell myself, you're reading Pema's book right now. You're not thinking about, you're not worrying about, you're not anticipating, this is this now, which in the beginning is like a weird conversation you're having with yourself. But the more you do it, the more you notice that your mind is wandering to the past, to the future, to the worry, to the anxiety, to the stress. And the more you bring yourself back to what it is, the task, the life, the moment you're in, the more you bring yourself back to the nowness, the more you are in the nowness. And the longer those moments of now stretch out. Okay, so thank you for that, Pema Chodron. I should have mentioned even before this book, just a really good book, Into the Magic Shop by James R. Doty. I think, and again, James, if you watch this, don't hate me, and I need to read your book again. But I remember when I was reading it in the beginning, like not being so like in love with it and thinking, oh my God, this is required reading, so I got to read it. But it was one of those stories, one of those journeys that James was planting seeds of inception the whole way, that ended up all coming together at the end. And I think his story is very much a story of brain training, and he says, and I mean, even I should read the subtitle so you know, a neurosurgeon's quest to discover the mysteries of the brain and the secrets of the heart. So you can imagine brain training makes a lot of sense. So this is another good one. I would put this over here with like Siddhartha, as in just like books just to sit down and like read and like just love. How to Meditate by Pema Chodron is another one I just keep going back to and back to and back to. It's like a must-have at arm's length kind of book. And don't let it intimidate you, and don't think you're above and beyond it. And why I say this is I've suggested this book to people, and then they're like, oh, well, that's too advanced for me, so I bought a different book because I can't meditate the way you meditate, because one of the ways that Pema talks about and coaches us to meditate is an eyes open, quiet meditation. And I love just the way I'm sitting right now in a Burmese posture and just kind of looking at the grain of the wood floor, which can, in my total nowness, in the total mindful focus, can turn into a glorious spectrum of color and light and almost like X-ray vision. Not like X-ray like I'm seeing through the floor, but like shadows and colors and light. And it's a very almost trippy experience, which could be just a physiological play with my eyes focusing all the time, but that's very intimidating. A lot of people really prefer to meditate eyes closed. Doesn't matter. Don't let her styles of meditation, don't get lost in all of that or worry that you have to do exactly what she's saying. Read the book, and each time you read it, you're gonna grab new things. And the one reason that I'm saying read this book is this is the book that turned the corner for me on mindfulness. And if you're thinking, are you going to get to the definition of mindfulness? I'm setting all the seeds of inception now with several books, and I will wrap this up a little more tidy, so don't worry. And that kind of brings me to this next book, which is The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer, The Journey Beyond Yourself. Another book that is all about mindfulness. Funny, this is like a theme. And there is one more book that I want to mention before I forget about it, and then I'll get back to this. I don't want to forget to mention The Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. And I don't have it here. Super quick, easy read. I read it on the beach in one afternoon, essentially. But it is also a book that I will go back and read again and again. All of these, the reason I'm pointing all of these books out in my definition of mindfulness is each one of these writers has a different perspective on mindfulness. Just like each yoga teacher will have a different perspective, whether that teacher is teaching you Iyengar or Ashtanga, which are both maybe we would agree under the umbrella of Hatha, Vinyasa, which is under all of those, not under or below, but just can be practiced through all of those. Yin yoga, I think I said Anusara if I didn't. There's all these different styles of yoga, and you may have a yoga teacher like myself who's been trained in Anusara, Iyengar, Ashtanga, Yin. And so when I end up teaching you a class, it's none of those specifically. It's all of those in general. And it's what works for me and what I think is relatable to my students historically. But then what you take away from that and what you may practice on your own or in a freestyle practice or an intuitive yoga practice may be something completely different. You may put together a completely different sequence, or you may align yourself completely different or take a down dog or whatever differently. So I'm talking about these 5 different perspectives on mindfulness, and none of them on the cover of the book do they say definition mindfulness. So I'll go deeper now that I've told you about these 5 books. Definition mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of noticing what I call the scatter and the wander of the brain. Another definition of that, Miguel Ruiz in The Four Agreements calls it the miotote, the many voices, which is another word, another definition of that is actually it's a native dance, but it's a disturbance. It's all the voices that you hear in your head, which are mainly your voice or a version of your voice, okay? But they are maybe echoes or reflections of other people's voices, opinions, and judgments, perhaps on you or others that affect your action or your thought process, your decisions that you make. In The Untethered Soul, really deep dive, wonderful. I'm actually reading this again in a kind of a one-on-one book group with one of my private students. Michael A. Singer really gets into it, and he talks about that voice in your head, your roommate that's there. And there are some of us who say, oh, there's no voice in my head. And he goes through some exercises to really identify that voice in your head, kind of like the little, the devil and the angel sitting on your shoulder that tells you, that takes your confidence away or boosts your confidence too high, if that's possible, makes you cocky or scared or embarrassed. And so now, and I don't want to get too deeply into this, but something I touch on a lot is the idea of samskara. Okay, so samskara, and just to go way deep, because you might think of a word like when I say karma, a lot of us in the Western world think of karma as my comeuppance. If I've done something, I stole something, so something will be stolen from me. in a more Eastern way, a deeper way, karma is just simply an action, which would be like, say, you stealing something. But let's look at it not as a negative, but just as an action historically that's already happened. Okay? And then samskara, or one of the many, and just like mindfulness, there's many perspectives on this, but samskara is the kind of mental imprint, the unconscious and sometimes conscious, and the volley between imprint that is affecting every decision we make, every thought we have, every action we have, the relationships, everything we're doing is and think about it, it's very basic, is all affected by stuff that's already happened. Because if you think of us as this like grand sponge, and we're sponging up water, both clean or dirty, whatever it is, we are these animals of mimicking. We are these animals of we see, and we go, oh, okay, and then we do what we see, right? That's how we learn. We learn by example, or we read and we imagine that we saw, and then we execute. So, for instance, it's a lot easier to learn yoga with a physical human being teaching you and showing you. You could read a ton, but it would help to see it as well. A couple different ways to go about it. So anyways, getting back to this idea of mindfulness, this idea from the Four Agreements of miyatote, this idea that Pema Chodron would refer to as the wild horse brain, or the monkey mind is another term for it, and that is those voices in your head, or as I call it, the scatter and wander of your brain. Mindfulness, very simply put, is noticing that is just that. That is just that. That is a distraction from this moment right here. So mindfulness is noticing the distraction, the scatter, the wander, the miyatote, the wild horse brain, the monkey mind, noticing it and coming back into the now, into nowness, into this very moment, realizing that everything that's happened already has already happened. Those were decisions that were already made, and there's no rewind, there's no pause, there's no take back. And everything that's going to happen, you really cannot be sure of. So to sit there and ruminate, that's another concept of miyatote, wild horse brain, monkey mind, rumination. To ruminate on this future is anxiety, right, and stress, and not because the future is not guaranteed. We really cannot 100% guarantee anything is going to happen. We can have an idea. We can, in yoga, it's interesting, and I keep coming back to yoga, and I want to say this. When I say yoga and I say mindfulness, they are, for me, interchangeable. So there's a definition for you. They are interchangeable. So when you talk about the 8 limbs of yoga and all the intentions of how you treat someone, how you treat the world, how you treat yourself, those are all practices. Those are all routines. Those are all rituals that have to do with rituals of thought and body, of spirit and mind, of breath, right? So mindfulness is all of that. If you're training your brain to act so that your physical body can act a certain way, clean a certain way, respond a certain way, listen a certain way, that's why, to me, the two are interchangeable, whether it's yoga or mindfulness. So you'll see some of my classes where I am teaching guided mindfulness. And people go, isn't that meditation? Well, meditation is part of yoga. So they're all just kind of a continuum for me. They may not be for you. But mindfulness is noticing all of that. And so here's the thing. In yoga, a lot of places, people will have goals. And so in yoga, we don't really like goals. Or many of us don't really like goals. Or in mindfulness, we don't really like goals. Because goals are this anxiety, anticipation, and stress about the future. In yoga, we prefer intentions. So in this now moment, I am going to set up how I speak, how I listen, and how I act so that with these intentions I set, the future will be glorious and perfect. And whatever it is that I really want, that I'm really trying to like have as part of my being, part of my nowness, rather than setting a goal and thinking this, I got to do this. It's if I be this way, if I am just being here now, completely responding, completely listening, completely having complete compassion, forgiveness, and love in this moment, I will have everything I want because I already have everything I want. And that may be like kind of a too deep, like bunch of somersaults, but that's what it's all about. It's all about being able to recognize that scatter, that wander, that miyatote, and say, wait a minute, that's not what I'm doing right now. That is regret, that is worry, but that is not right now. So that is my definition of mindfulness. The practice, the training, the ritual of recognizing the scatter and the wander and training the brain to come back to now and stretching those moments of now longer and longer and longer. So many beliefs would say that being completely in the now always would be enlightenment. I don't know anyone, including myself, that's always in the now. So it's a lifetime practice of mindfulness to be in the now. Is being in the now mindfulness? I don't think so. I think mindfulness is noticing when you're not in the now and bringing yourself back to the now. So I just want to add a little bit of color and texture, a little more moments to this. So, one of the things I do is play singing bowls. And I guide pranayama, which is breath work. I coach on breath work. And then I also am a teacher of yoga asana, which is the physical practice of yoga. And I also lead Dharma talks, which is kind of what we're doing right now, okay? I joke, and I don't joke, I mean this seriously, but it's kind of a play on words that has people going, huh? I joke that all of those things are distractions to bring you back to the now. And I think a lot of yoga teachers wouldn't want to say that because we have a negative concept of what distraction is. And I would like to embrace the idea that a distraction is merely taking your mind from wherever it is to this new thing, whether it's the ring of this bowl or the feel of your breath, the molecules of air passing over your lips, for instance, in a breath exercise, or the color and movement on the back of your eyelids, for instance, that life, that miracle within your body, the voice of the teacher that's guiding the meditation, perhaps it's your heartbeat in every moment of your body. If you get to that point where you're feeling your heartbeat even in the tips of your fingers, or perhaps it's how you run your thumb over your fingernails and feel how in your body you are in that very moment. All of those things are tools to bring you back to now that you can put in your big mental, emotional, consciousness awakening tool chest, the tool chest of the mind, or the magic shop of the mind, or the river of the mind. So when you have this constant issue of rumination and worry and distraction of these other and your own voices that are causing you the stress, the anxiety, the insomnia, you then have tools like a sound bath. You have tools like a physical asana practice. You have tools like a breath practice, either guided or a personal breath practice. Tools to focus on, to distract you from the distractions. So that's why I like to say they're distractions. These tools are distractions that distract you away from all of that noise, that myotote, that wild horse brain, that monkey mind, that rumination, into the now. And so with all of these tools, which are mindfulness tools, right? You are on this practice now, this journey of mindfulness, and you're able to use all of these tools. You're able to use. They're there for you to bring you back here now, so you can sleep, so you can think, so you can just be, so you can relax, so you can, sit on a decision, a possibility, a relationship, whatever it is. So I call it chapter 0.5, chapter 1, whatever it is. We'll come back and we'll discuss mindfulness more, and I'll discuss all 5 of those books, and I will list all 5 of those books. And if you have questions, certainly in the comments. I did mention, of course, teaching classes at Live Kick online every Sunday night, teaching private classes, and of course this YouTube channel. I'm adding more all the time, so please subscribe. This is just step 1, just tiptoeing into the waters, into the river of mindfulness. Thank you guys. Stay curious. Be wonderful.